you got Joe Lauzon.
Yeah.
Look at Joe Lauzon. He looks like a fucking nerd. Yeah. Let me tell you how that story ends. Fuck Joe Lauzon. See what happens.
Joe Lauzon might be the UFC's most violent IT guy. He never won a title. He never even fought for one. But when Lauzon stepped into the cage, fans stopped scrolling. He has got more bonus checks than some champs have wins. He has fought in 3 different decades, and yet somehow he became one of the most respected lightweights ever, without ever breaking into the top 5. So, what happened? One day he was brawling on pay-per-view, then he just wasn't. No big retirement, no farewell tour. His last fight, a dominant first-round win in 2019. Since then, silence. No fights, no interviews, no fuss. Joe Lauzon disappeared the same way he entered, quietly. But that doesn't mean that his story wasn't wild. How did a guy who looked like your coworker from tech support become one of the most feared and beloved action fighters in UFC history? Only to ghost the game like he was never there? Let's talk about it.
I wasn't like this blockhead. I wasn't this maniac. Like, I'm very, very reserved. I'm very, very quiet. But then when it comes fight time, you flip in a switch and I'm totally different.
Joe Lauzon didn't grow up in a gym. He wasn't tossing kids around in judo class at age 6. He wasn't some wrestling prodigy from Iowa. He was just a regular kid from Massachusetts. He studied computer science, wrote code, fixed bugs. He had every piece of a future software engineer. Except one. He could fight. Not get into the occasional bar scrap fight, not a black belt in karate at your local strip mall fight. We're talking 8 straight stoppage wins type fight. And all before he even stepped inside the UFC. You see, back then, MMA wasn't on ESPN. It wasn't cool. It was gritty, underground, still fighting for legitimacy. Joe didn't care. Punching people in the face wasn't his career. It was his hobby. He was the most dangerous computer programmer in America. Then he got the call. The UFC debut. Opponent? Jens Pulver, a former UFC champion, a guy who had fought BJ Penn and come out on the other side breathing.
So my first fight in the UFC was against Jens Pulver. Didn't know what I was getting into.
But this is definitely a significant test for him.
But I just remember going to the venue and going to the hotel and checking in, and everyone was it's for my first time. No one knows me. Oh, who are you fighting? I'm like, oh, I'm fighting Jens Pulver. He was the reigning champ to that point. He was the UFC champion that is supposed to be fighting him. And every time I meet someone there, I was like, oh, who are you fighting? And they just all looked down. It wasn't a good.
Now, nobody gave Joe a chance. Pulver was the name. Lauzon was the placeholder. 48 seconds. That is how long it took Joe to flatten him. Clean overhand right, ground and pound, done. People didn't know what to do with that. Was it a fluke? A lucky punch? Nope, it was Lauzon arriving. The knockout wasn't just impressive, it was disrespectful. Jens Pulver was supposed to be getting a tune-up. Instead, he got a rude welcome back. And just like that, Joe Lauzon became a name. He got thrown into the Ultimate Fighter Season 5, the lightweight season, the stacked season. BJ Penn, Nate Diaz, Gray Maynard, Manny Gamburian. It was a Shark Tank, and Lauzon wasn't just keeping up, he was winning. He wasn't flashy outside of the cage, no trash talk, no wild antics, but inside, he was a problem. Relentless pressure, slick grappling, weird timing on the feet. Dana White reportedly called him the most exciting fighter in the lightweight division. And at that time, it was not hyperbole. Joe wasn't the best, but he was the most watchable. And the best part was, he still hadn't quit his day job. He was juggling software updates and rear naked chokes. Now, fighters usually have one path. Joe had 2. That duality made him weirdly relatable. Fans loved him because he looked like one of them, and then he'd pull off a flying triangle like it was nothing. While most fighters lived in the gym, Joe was running one. Lauzon MMA became a hub for rising talent. He coached, he mentored, he trained. all while still fighting at the highest level in the world. He didn't look like a killer, but he was becoming a cult favorite, because you never got a boring Joe Lauzon fight. Not once. Now, if you blinked during a Lauzon fight, you might miss the whole thing. The man fought like he was late for something. Aggressive grappling, slick submissions, sneaky striking. He didn't ease into fights, he jumped in head first. From the opening bell, it was chaos. He'd either snatch your neck or eat your lunch trying. It was go time, always. That is why fans loved him. That is why Dana loved him. And that is why he became a bonus machine. 15 post-fight bonuses, tied for second most ever, and every one earned the hard way. When you watched Joe fight, you knew one thing. Win or lose, something crazy was about to happen. His fights weren't just fights. They were roller coasters, bloody, technical, reckless roller coasters. And if you're wondering what that style costs, yeah, well, we'll get into that later. Even UFC brass nicknamed him the Joe Lauzon bonus. Your name doesn't become shorthand for extra cash without receipts. Melvin Guillard dropped and choked inside one round. Jim Miller, absolute war, bonus secured. Jamie Varner ate hell for 2 rounds, then flipped the script and nearly finished him. It was chaos by design. Joe's style wasn't built for longevity, it was built for the moment. He would trade position for damage. He'd chase the finish over playing it safe. He wasn't trying to game plan his way to a 30-27 decision. He was trying to rip your head off or hand you his own. His submission game was sneaky, opportunistic, quick as hell. Triangle chokes, kimuras, armbar transitions. His ground game was a jiu-jitsu highlight reel. His striking was underrated and unorthodox. Not the cleanest, but always dangerous. He would rock you with an awkward jab, then shoot a double leg while you were still trying to process what just hit you. And fans ate it up. Joe Lauzon didn't just win fights, he survived them. Barely. And nothing captures that better than the Jim Miller trilogy. Their first fight in 2012 was an instant classic. A bloodbath. By the end of it, Lauzon looked like he had done surgery on himself without anesthesia. The stats were wild. Most combined strikes in a UFC lightweight bout at the time. One of the bloodiest, non-finished fights in UFC history. By round 2, the mat looked like a crime scene, and Joe was still pushing forward, still throwing. He lost the decision, but fans didn't care. It was one of those fights, the kind that turns mid-tier fighters into cult heroes. The rematch had a different tone, more calculated, more strategic, but still violent, still Lauzon. And when they finally completed the trilogy, it was less about who won and more about who was still standing. That's just how it was with Joe. You didn't remember the scorecards, you remembered the carnage. And that carnage left its mark. By 30, Joe's face had become a scar map that would bleed during walkouts. His bonus hunting style made him age twice as fast, running on tape, adrenaline, and painkillers. He adjusted with smarter training and less sparring, but the damage was already done. And yet, despite the wars, he kept showing up. Even when the losses piled up, fans never turned on him. Look at the career, peaks and valleys. For every setback, there was a moment. Lost to Anthony Pettis, bounced back. Outworked by Jim Miller, put on a clinic against Diego Sanchez. Dropped a decision to Michael Chiesa, still went out swinging. He never won 3 or 4 in a row to climb into title contention, but he didn't have to, because his job wasn't to compete, it was to entertain. Now, fighters don't usually get to pick when the decline hits, but when it did for Joe Lauzon, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. No brutal knockouts, no endless losing streak, just a slow shift in speed, timing, recovery. The pace slowed. The body doesn't lie. When you have fought like Joe for over a decade, every training session feels heavier. The sparring rounds that used to feel sharp start to feel sluggish. And yet, he kept going. In 2018, he fought Stevie Ray. Tough opponent, mid-tier guy. Joe didn't look like Joe. He was slower. He was getting touched more. The takedowns weren't coming as easily. He took a lot of damage, and for the first time, fans started asking, is this it? But then, like only Lauzon could, he came back with a vintage performance. 2019, Boston, his hometown.
Joe Lauzon has hinted this could be his final UFC walk. He'll certainly have the crowd behind him when he makes it to take on Jonathan Pierce.
He faced Jonathan Pierce, a young gun from Dana White's Contender Series. This was supposed to be a passing of the torch moment. Instead, Joe burned it all down. He sliced through Pierce in one round. Classic Joe. Straight to the clinch, trip takedown, full mount. Then that signature crank that looked part submission, part medieval torture device. The crowd exploded. Commentators lost it. Joe walked away with his arm raised, looking 10 years younger. It was the perfect moment to retire. In Boston, in front of his people, after a dominant win. But he didn't say a word, just another Joe Lauzon exit, low-key and unbothered. Then came the Donald Cerrone booking. It was beautiful matchmaking, two fan-favorite legends, two war veterans of the Octagon who had never fought until now. It was the kind of fight that didn't need belts, didn't need rankings, just needed to happen. But the MMA gods had other plans. The fight got scrapped, then delayed, then scrapped again. Training injuries, fight week issues, bad luck across the board.
Are you going to book Joe and Donald Cerrone again for the third time?
Probably not. Probably not. That thing's getting like Tony and Habib. No, I will not book that fight again.
Did you talk to Donald tonight, and did he say anything about
Donald?
What's next for him?
Yeah, he just cut that weight yesterday. We wanted to see if he wanted to fight in July. He doesn't want to cut weight again, so he won't fight in July. We'll figure something else out with him.
They never stepped into the cage together. And just like that, the perfect send-off slipped away. Joe Lauzon didn't campaign for a replacement fight after the Cerrone fight fell through. He didn't go on a media tour. He didn't ask Dana for one more shot. He just disappeared. That final victory in Boston, turns out that was it. And most people didn't even realize it until years later. We're used to fighters making big exits. They cry in the cage, they wave goodbye. Sometimes they unretire the next week, but at least they say something. Joe gave us 15 years and walked away like he was clocking out of his shift at Best Buy. Look at his social media. No retirement post, no thanks for the ride, just occasional coaching updates and gym content. The UFC didn't say anything either. No tribute video, no Hall of Fame announcement, no official retirement. For a guy with 27 UFC fights, you would expect a little more. But nope. One of the most consistent, exciting, and fan-loved fighters in lightweight history just faded out. And here's the part that's even more wild. Fans noticed the quiet departure. Reddit threads asked, wait, is Joe Lauzon done? MMA Twitter kept tagging him in throwback clips. It felt wrong. A fighter with his impact leaving without a ceremony, while others with half of his resume got highlight reels and Dana White handshakes. Joe was totally fine with that. No complaints, no bitterness. He just pivoted like he always did, from fighter to coach, from chaos machine to mentor. He had already built the next phase of his life while still fighting. That IT brain of his had planned ahead. Now let's talk numbers, because for all the chaos, blood, and octagon carnage, Joe Lauzon's career wasn't just about vibes, it was about stats. And they tell a story the UFC forgot to print. 29 wins, 16 losses. That is a long, messy record filled with killers, upsets, and absolute wars. But let's dig deeper. 15 post-fight bonuses, tied for second most in UFC history. That's not a stat, that's a resume. 13 UFC finishes, tied for 6th all-time, and more than any other lightweight. Read that again. More finishes than BJ Penn. More than Frankie Edgar. More than Habib. And those weren't padded wins. We are talking legends like Jens Pulver, Melvin Gillard, Jamie Varner, and Michael Chiesa. That is 4 names right there who were all legit, all dangerous, all respected. Joe fought 32 times in major promotions, 27 of those inside the UFC cage. That is longevity and consistency. Now let's talk money. You think bonus hunting was just for show? Nope, it paid the bills. Those 15 bonuses, that's likely close to 7 figures in extra money. And he didn't blow it. This was a guy who still worked IT jobs during training camps. He started a gym while still fighting. Lauzon MMA wasn't just a side hustle. It was the exit strategy, the next chapter, built while the first one was still running. Most fighters wait until they're broken. Joe didn't. He taught classes, built a fight team, managed his brand, all while competing in the most cutthroat division in MMA. Now you could call it smart, or maybe it was just Joe being Joe. Not flashy, not loud, just efficient. And it's working. Lauzon MMA is thriving. He is coaching young killers. And yeah, people are still asking, should he be in the UFC Hall of Fame? It is a fair question. No title, no headliners, but 15 bonuses, most finishes at lightweight? If guys like Stephan Bonner and Clay Guida are in the conversation, Joe should be too. Fans and media argue that he deserves a nod for his fan favorite status and record-breaking finishes. He defined what a fan favorite looked like. He proved that skill, grit, and chaos could all live in the same body. He gave everything, then left quietly. Where does he rank in the all-time lightweight discussion? He's not on the Mount Rushmore, but he is definitely somewhere on the mountain. Because when fans talk about who they loved watching, Joe's name always comes up. He made being a fighter look fun. Messy, risky, and painful, but fun. He didn't protect his record, he protected our excitement. He made violence beautiful without needing the spotlight. Joe Lauzon never wore UFC gold. He never chased the fame. He never begged for one last fight. He just showed up, fought like a maniac, and left with his dignity, and his brain still intact. And maybe that's exactly how Joe wanted it, because while the UFC never gave him his big moment, he gave us 100 of them.